What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Martian MMA podcast. It's going to be a solo episode this week. Ozzy's out of the country and not able to record, so I'm going to be breaking down this Rozenstruik versus Gaziev card for you this week. We got 11 fights going down from the UFC Apex this Saturday. Early start time, 1:30 p.m. Eastern. And I am quite sick. Do have a case of the COVID, and my throat is in pretty bad condition. So this might be one of the quickest Martian MMA podcasts of all time. Also, you couple in the fact that we have just a weak card. I mean, this card is dog shit, to put it lightly. A lot of unknown fighters, a lot of questionable fights. And from a betting perspective, just looking across the board, not many competitively lined fights. I mean, I don't understand where all these big favorites are coming from, but, I just don't think a lot of these lines are too interesting to me. A lot of, big minus 800, 900, 1,000 favorites. I mean, we don't get those too often. And on this card, we happen to have 3 of those favorites that are almost, 90%. So I don't really see too many betting angles on a lot of these. And I'm going to try to keep it brief because there's just not a whole lot to like this week. So, and in terms of last week, the Mexico card was pretty fun. I think our podcast reads were pretty good overall. The Ortega fight, Ortega sub, was a big one for us. And overall, just a fun card, a lot of good live betting spots, as always. I'm just mostly interested in live betting these days. I just feel like some of these books have such good, widely available live lines that there's not even a whole lot of reason to bet a lot of these fights beforehand, because you could just jump in live and get that same line, get a better line. And when you're watching the fight play out live, I feel it's just so much easier to see how it's going and be confident in your picks. So I need to personally, work on just increasing the stake of my live bets because sometimes they're just super easy spots. I mean, especially if you have access to DraftKings in America, their live lines are just fantastic. They overreact really quickly. And, back in the day, you used to see the live lines get pulled. It still happens on FanDuel and BetOnline. The live lines get pulled. When someone gets a takedown or a knockdown or something, the line goes away for 30 seconds and then it comes back. But on DraftKings, for some reason, they almost never pull the lines, and it's almost always available. So if you have, a good stream, if you are able to get ahead of the streams like that, you can really make a lot of money on these live bets. So, keep an eye out for that if you are interested in live bets. And yeah, let's get into these fights. We got 11 fights. Like I said, I'm going to get through these pretty quickly. I would be surprised if this lasted more than 30 minutes. And once again, just got to apologize for, my throat and not really sounding too hot. So let's get into these. We got a heavyweight main event, Jairzinho Rozenstruik's 6th main event in the UFC. Insane statistic, taking on the undefeated Shamil Gaziev. The line for this one, Gaziev minus 150, Rozenstruik coming back plus 130. So Gaziev opened his last fight as the first fight on the card versus Martin Buday. His second fight is headlining versus Jairzinho Rozenstruik. I mean, I don't know what that goes to show. The barrier for these main events is low, and the UFC loves bigger guys in these main events. 185, 205, heavyweight. These guys do not deserve to be in a main event, and this is a terrible main event. Really would have think, honestly, like Alex Perez versus Mokaev would have been a better main event than this. So I honestly think Gaziev will win. It sounds a little bit foolish considering I was pretty confident and I bet Martin Buday against him just a few months back. He got absolutely destroyed in that fight, but I thought Gaziev, looked solid there. I mean, he threw out an insane amount of volume. We didn't really get to see his offensive grappling. We didn't really get to see his cardio tested. But, I mean, he just went after Buday there, was throwing an onslaught of straight punches. Really good clinch work as well. He would push Buday to the cage, get that collar tie, land those knees and elbows. And I think that, really zapped a lot of the energy from Buday there. And I just think that's going to happen here. I mean, Rozenstruik, his footwork has always stunk. And in the small cage, it's going to be even worse for him. I think Gaziev is just going to, plow forward, not give Rozenstruik the front foot, because when you give Rozenstruik the front foot, he's comfortable. But when you push him back, he collapses pretty soon. We saw that in the Ngannou fight. Ngannou just ran forward, windmilled some punches, put him out. I think Gaziev will do something similar, but a little more, coordinated. Going to push Rozenstruik to the fence, get the clinch, wear on him, use his weight on him against the cage. land those knees and elbows in the clinch, and eventually find a finish here. I didn't take Gaziev money line. The early prices on him were good, but looking at the odds for this one now, I kind of lean the fight to end in round 2 or round 3. Just either guy winning in the second or third round, plus 310 for round 2, plus 800 for round 3. Because I just think they're gonna be tough enough to survive. I don't think either guy's just gonna knock each other out instantly in this one. But I think after a round, it's going to be either Gaziev gassing out and getting knocked out, or it's going to be Rozenstruik gassing from the pressure and the strikes of Gaziev and folding. So I'm looking to just bet either guy to win in the second or third round here, but not a high confidence play. It's a gross fight, as I mentioned, and that's going to move us along to the co-main event. Vitor Petrino taking on Tyson Pedro. The odds for this one have Petrino as the big favorite, minus 300, Pedro plus 250. So I think Petrino won't have too much trouble here. I mean, Pedro is he really can't fight for more than a round. I don't think he's ever won a fight that has gone out of round 1. Yep, that is true. Every time the fight has left the first round, he's lost. So the guy is a one-round fighter. His physicality and his mentality just kind of collapses after that first round, and he can't sustain himself past the first round. So I honestly think 75% for Petrino here is pretty fair. Might even be a little bit wider because Petrino's the real deal, man. This guy's an incredible athlete, good striker, good grappler, and seriously, I think one of the best athletes in all of MMA right now. And he's knocked out opponents in the UFC. He's submitted them. He's won by decision. He's done a little bit of everything. And I think that if any area is troubling for Petrino here, it might be the grappling. I could see Pedro landing a takedown in the first round here, but I think Petrino will be safe to defend, whatever submission Pedro's going to throw at him. And eventually Petrino will survive it and finish him in these later rounds here. So maybe look at Petrino to win in the second or third round, and I'll also be looking for that Petrino live bet, because if any success Pedro has is going to be in the first round, we should be getting a better live price, and that's my angle on this fight. Third fight on the card is in the flyweight division. We have another undefeated fighter in Mokaev taking on Alex Perez, and this one is lined at Mokaev minus 350, Perez plus 285. So Perez at one point was a really solid fighter, made his way to the championship fight against Figueiredo, but back-to-back big fights of his, he just got, choked out in the first round. Pantoja, Figueiredo. This guy's had an insane amount of canceled fights, just an insane amount. He pulled out, his opponents pulled out, he missed weight. This guy's been an absolute disaster, just pulling out of fights left and right. And, that kind of makes it a little hard to trust him. Also, he did a grappling match against a former Penn State wrestler named Roman Bravo Young, and I watched that match at the time, and Perez did not try at all. I mean, a lot of grappling fights end up being like stalling matches where they're pushing each other, and if you watch that fight, it's just clear that Perez is making no effort. He doesn't want to win. He doesn't want to pass. He doesn't want to land takedowns. He clearly just signed up for that match to get paid and to not get submitted, and he put no effort forth. So you got to question where this guy's head is at with pulling out all these fights, missing weight left and right. Hasn't won a fight since Jussier Formiga back in June of 2020. So 3.5 years since he's won a fight, and every single guy he's beaten in the UFC is no longer in the UFC. Every single one of his wins, the guys, just weren't that good. Jussier Formiga is a great fighter and is still winning fights to this day, but that's really the only good win he has. So I think people kind of overrate Alex Perez a lot. Now, Mokaev is also overrated. I don't think this guy is that great. I mean, he's just a one-dimensional fighter, a grappler. He gets in a lot of stalling positions. He has really boring fights, honestly. And I do think he will win here because of one thing. Alex Perez gives up his back. Guys who wrestle, this is a problem for them when they transition to MMA or into jiu-jitsu. They're just not familiar with getting their back taken. It's not really a position where they have to be aware of as much in wrestling, so they're a little lackadaisical in their defense, and when they get taken down, they give up their back. And I think that Mokaev is just going to ride him from the back here, take his back, put the hooks in, or maybe just ride him like he did against Charles Johnson, dragging him back down over and over. Tim Elliott had a really close fight with Mokaev before getting submitted there. But I think Tim Elliott's honestly a better MMA grappler than Alex Perez is. And I'm looking at this fight to go the distance. I've gotten burnt on this before, most recently versus Tim Elliott. It's plus money here, plus 120 for this fight to go the distance. And I honestly think it will be a Mokaev decision, plus 185. And if you look at the lines, they have submission more likely than decision for Mokaev, which I think is wrong. I think that should be flipped. I think decision is a little more likely. So maybe look to play this one, go in the distance, starting round 3, Mokaev round 3 or decision. Let me see what that line is at on FanDuel. Oh, plus 120 for Mokaev round 3 or decision. That's my bet for the fight. I like that. I'm gonna click that right now, because I just think that Perez will do enough to survive early on here, and I'm just kind of underwhelmed with Mokaev's submission ability, and he'll do enough to survive to make it to the third round or a decision before eventually getting submitted or just losing the decision here. But I'm not expecting too much from Perez here. I think he's kind of phoning it in at this point, so hopefully he tries in this fight. Hopefully he makes weight and the fight actually takes place, because we've broken down several Perez fights before that they have not taken place. So it will be a Mokaev round 3 or decision bet for me in this one. Next fight is another undefeated fighter, Umar Nurmagomedov, taking on Basharat-Almakhan. And Beksat making his UFC debut here, minus 1,000 for Umar, plus 700 for Beksat. Really cool name, Beksat, by the way. And this guy's a solid fighter. I watched his fights, and he's solid everywhere. He has gotten dropped by a few guys. That was what I would say is his biggest concern. But he's recovered well, and I think this guy's a really solid defensive grappler, a good offensive grappler, and he's just fighting and beating good competition over there in Europe. So I think this is a solid fight, even though this guy's making his UFC debut. I think he's going to be a good test for Umar. And Umar is obviously very, very legit, but it's just a shame that he hasn't really fought that step up in competition yet. He did beat Raoni Barcelos with that crazy knockout. Even though that was an impressive knockout, I just don't think we got to see a ton from Umar there. I would have liked to see a more played out fight and to see him tested a little bit. And I think Beksat will test him. He will be difficult to take down, but I just see it being hard for Beksat to get his own offense going. I think he's going to do well defending and surviving here, but in terms of actually landing his own offense and building something, I do see that being troublesome. So I think he'll defend early and then eventually start, losing more clearly in the later rounds. Kind of similar to how the Morozov fight went. I actually think that this guy's a better defensive grappler than Morozov, though, honestly. So a bet for this fight I'm looking at is, maybe Umar to submit him in the later rounds. Obviously Umar is a more submission-oriented fighter, despite him coming off that Raoni knockout. But I think the late submission here might be a good play. We've seen him land late submissions a few times, most notably with the Morozov fight. I was just talking about another Kazakhstani fight here. Kind of a similar story. Morozov, I think, was making his debut. A solid fighter, but just not quite on the level of Umar. But I honestly think this Beksat guy might be better than Morozov. So I definitely think Beksat will win UFC fights. I think this is a pretty legit fight considering it's on short notice and Umar is struggling to find opponents. And I would be looking to play, Umar's late submission props here. Round 2, round 3 sub, plus 400 on FanDuel. So that'll do it for that fight. In the next fight, we have another flyweight fight. We have Matt Schnell versus Steve Erceg. Odds for this one have Erceg as the big favorite, minus 435. Schnell coming back plus 335. So I think a lot of people have the same consensus here that this will be a competitive fight for as long as it lasts until Matt Schnell gets hurt, because Matt Schnell's defense, his chin, both terrible. He does this weird thing with his head where he's trying to act like his defense is a lot better than it is, but he ends up just getting hit a lot and rocked a lot, and he's been knocked out a ton in the UFC. Even the fights where he's won some of them, he's been dropped and hurt really badly. Most notably the Sumu Darji fight. I was at that fight live, an absolutely insane fight, probably the craziest fight I've ever been to live. And Schnell's a fun fighter, man. It's just this guy doesn't have the hardware to fight at 125. And Erceg is a solid fighter, only a few fights into his UFC run, but I've been impressed so far. He's tall for the weight class. He's solid everywhere. He has, good striking, solid boxing, good offensive and defensive wrestling. So I see it being tough for Schnell to build anything here when you just know that at any moment Erceg can land a punch that will, hurt Schnell and possibly even put him out. So I would be looking at Schnell live here, because if you bet Schnell before the fight plus 330 something, sure, that's probably value. But I would like to see the fight play out for a little bit, see what Schnell's approach is. And if Schnell gets hurt and knocked out in the first few minutes here, you get to avoid that. So, I would say wait for live, see how it's going. Oh, Matt Schnell's doing pretty good. He's got the right approach. Okay, I'm going to live bet him. The odds are not going to change that much. I really don't think so. Would a knocker play on Erceg KO plus 200, because this guy does seem predominantly to be a boxing offense-oriented fighter, and Schnell's defense is some of the worst of all time. So if you're interested in stabbing on that, I wouldn't knock it, but I'll be looking for Schnell live here. And that's going to move us on to the prelims. Eric Anders taking on Jamie Pickett in the premier division of the UFC. Another huge favorite here. Eric Anders minus 500, Jamie Pickett plus 375. I actually bet Eric Anders a long time ago, maybe a month and a half ago. The odds at the time were minus 218, and that really stuck out to me at the time, because I think Anders is actually a solid fighter, underrated fighter, and Pickett is just a total scrub, man. I mean, he's lost 4 fights in a row in the UFC. I don't even know why they're giving him a fifth fight, excuse me. And yeah, overall 2-6 in the UFC. And the guys he's beaten, Holmes and Staropoli, not even in the UFC anymore. This guy just is, a mental midget, not even a good fighter. Doesn't really deal with adversity very well. And I think Eric Anders is just going to beat the shit out of him, honestly. It's just a matter of, is it going to be a knockout for Anders or a decision? I see a lot of people playing the overs in the decision here, but I would not advise that, man. I think with the way Pickett's been looking lately, he clearly seems to be phoning it in. He's not really attempting to win these fights very handedly, and I would not be surprised if Eric Anders just landed some punches, Jamie shelled up and didn't want anymore. Jamie has been pretty durable to strikes throughout his career, but I think Eric Anders is an underrated puncher, and I just don't see what Pickett's going to do. Pickett's going to be trying to swing at Anders of his own right. He's going to be throwing big punches to try to win via KO. That's the only way that Pickett can win. He can't submit or win a decision here. So we might actually see Anders wrestle, mixing some takedowns. That would be the best bet for the over, because Anders doesn't really have a finish-oriented top game nor a submission game. So if you think Anders is going to wrestle here and land takedowns, I would maybe consider the over, but I don't think so. And I just think Anders is going to decisively win. So I have my minus 218. That's good enough for me. Let's see what our boy Pickett KO is, because like I said, I think that's the only way he can win the fight. It's plus, 750, 900 on some books. Yeah, I mean, that's not an atrocious bet, because I think he will swing. He will, attempt to throw some strikes to end the fight here. And, we've seen Anders buzzed in the past. I don't think he's been knocked out one time, and I think it was not even at this weight class, right? It wasn't at like 205. Yeah, it was Thiago Santos at 205. So, and that was a corner stoppage, short notice fight, corner stoppage. So, I mean, Anders has been pretty durable throughout his career. I don't see him having much trouble here. He should roll. Next fight is a fun fight. Vinicius Oliveira taking on Bernardo-Sopaj. The odds for this one have Oliveira minus 128, Sopaj coming back plus 107. Some various lines available out there. I think you can still get Oliveira at a better line on FanDuel. It looks like right now minus 115. I bet Oliveira here. I took him minus 112 to win 1 unit. I watched the footage of both these guys. I just think it's a pretty clear lean to Oliveira here. I mean, I think Oliveira has fought and beaten the better competition. He's fought in, more reputable promotions. The UAE Warriors is a solid promotion. He's picked up a lot of victories over there. And Sopaj fought in UAE Warriors as well, but I think he lost. Oh, no, he fought in Brave FC, which is a decent promotion. Went 1-1 there. And after he lost that fight to Newsy via decision, he went back to kind of more regional Swedish promotions, lower level promotions, and he finished multiple guys in a row there. But the Newsy fight, I mean, it just shows that this guy Sopaj is skilled overall. He has skill everywhere. I don't think he's bad anywhere, but I don't think he has a super high output or initiative or aggression in these fights. I think he kind of is comfortable with it being, a decision type of fight, a sparring fight. And that Newsy fight, he lost via split decision, and I don't blame him, because just not a whole lot happened in that fight. So sure, he knocked out lower level guys after that loss, but I think Oliveira is one of the best opponents he's fought to date, probably the best opponent. And Oliveira is a little chinny. He does tend to get wild and just throw crazy punches in the pocket. So if Sopaj, bites down on the mouthpiece in the pocket and fires back a counter, he has the potential to hurt and knock out Oliveira. But I just think Oliveira has a little more ways to win. I trust him better, and also he's the one fighting in this full camp, right? He was the one supposed to be fighting here. His opponent pulled out. Sopaj filled in on short notice. He's never fought in America, and he had a fight scheduled in Sweden on March 9th. So you got to think he was probably in Sweden a couple days ago. Now he's got to travel all the way across the world to Las Vegas, fight in the U.S. for the first time, fight in the UFC Apex for the first time, while Oliveira has already done that. So I just think a lot of things point to Oliveira here, and I'm down to take him at that near pick'em price. I wouldn't go past minus 140 for Oliveira though. So next one is a fight in the bantamweight division. Javid Basharat taking on Zahabi. Odds for this one have Basharat minus 800 coming back with Zahabi plus 550. I mean, not too much to say here. I think Javid is gonna win this fight handedly. Zahabi somehow has 3 UFC wins in a row, I think, in the underdog in all 3 of those. So he's been performing well. He's been overperforming. I've been wrong picking a few of his fights, most notably the Tercios and Aori fight. I was wrong on both of those there. But Basharat's just a really, really solid fighter, man. He's good everywhere, good volume on the feet. He can land takedowns. And I just think that he's going to probably keep this fight standing and just outpoint Zahabi to a decision. The decision line is obviously heavily favored, minus 165. I mean, I wouldn't knock maybe someone taking like a round 2, round 3 knockout stab on Javid here because Zahabi, we haven't even seen him. We saw him versus Tercios in the later rounds, but we haven't seen him late in the fight too often lately. And I think it's possible that Javid could just, wear on him in terms of an athletic standpoint and just an output, just pumping nonstop strikes on him. But yeah, I don't know, man. I think this is a really strange matchmaking, honestly. I know that Zahabi has 3 wins in a row, but Javid, he's on a roll, man. I want to see this guy fight better opponents, and I don't find this fight too interesting, and the odds reflect that. Another minus 800 favorite, and I don't see a betting angle I love on that one. We're moving on to another fight in the Premier Division. Christian Leroy Duncan taking on Claudio Ribeiro. Odds for this one, Duncan minus 305, Ribeiro plus 255. I think the odds are right, honestly. I think Ribeiro needs a knockout here, but Duncan is the better striker. He's much quicker. I think he's probably more durable as well. We've seen Ribeiro hurt. We've seen him knocked out twice in the UFC already. Kopylov and Razak both knocked him out in the second round. I could see Ribeiro maybe attempting some takedowns here, but I don't think his grappling is any good, and I think Leroy should be able to deal with it without much trouble. And, Leroy impressed me in that last fight against Tallulah, and just nonstop onslaught of offense from distance, from the clinch, just a brutal beating in that fight. And I think this has potential to look the same way, and I think Duncan's going to knock him out. The odds on that one, though, I think are like minus 110 for Duncan KO. Let me check this one out. Yeah, they're not even available on FanDuel right now. I think DraftKings has them though. But yeah, I wouldn't even take the round 2, round 3 because I really think it could be round 1 because the speed difference is going to be massive here, and I just don't think Ribeiro is any good. So honestly, minus 110 for Leroy knockout. I'll endorse it. I'll send it. It's never typically a good idea to pay juice on like a method of victory, like knockout like that, but it's slight juice. It's minus 110, and I think this should be target practice for Leroy Duncan here. So next fight, lightweight division, Ludovic Klein taking on short notice opponent AJ Cunningham. Odds for this one, Klein minus 900, Cunningham plus 600. Another uninteresting fight here. Cunningham does not deserve to be in the UFC. Got beat decisively by Steve Nguyen on the Contender Series. Just showed nothing good there. Just took an absolute beating the entire time. And that's why you see Klein KO favored minus 165. I don't know, man. I would say maybe play Klein sub or decision or something. Maybe just fade the KO. I think the KO, obviously, it's got to be the most likely by a little bit, but Klein sub decision plus 140. Klein does like to mix in takedowns a good amount, right? I don't think he has many submissions. He has 8 submissions. I don't think any in the UFC. Hasn't had a submission for a long time. It seems like his early fights were a lot of submissions, but he hasn't had many lately. But I would just be looking to play that. Hopefully he mixes in some takedowns and grapples here and either submits him or takes him to a decision. But that's a pretty low confidence pick for me. I don't know, man. Cunningham is probably just taking this fight just to get into the UFC. And I have no faith in this guy at all. So maybe don't even take that subber decision, because I wouldn't want to be exposed to losing on this one at all with how low level of an opponent Cunningham is. Pretty worthless fight, man. I would honestly rather Klein just get the fight postponed and fight a few more weeks later versus a legit opponent instead of this bum. Anyway, first fight on the card, has lightweight division Loic Radzhabov taking on Al-Selwady, Abdul Karim Al-Selwady. Odds for this one have Al-Selwady minus 178, Loic plus 153. This line opened up pretty much completely flipped. Al-Selwady was the plus 150 dog, and it caught my eye about a month ago. I didn't bet it and, was kicking myself, obviously, when I saw one day the line pretty much completely flipped to Al-Selwady favorite. And I think it's right where it's at now. I mean, Loic, not really a skilled striker, in my opinion. He's just mostly a wrestler, and his top game sucks. He lands a lot of takedowns, but he doesn't keep his opponents down. And Al-Selwady, I think, has pretty solid takedown defense. He's a much better boxer. I think he has a really solid output, good cardio, proven to win fights via decision, has won a lot of fights via decision, undefeated, 5-0 when the fights go to the decision. Loic, on the other hand, 5-4 in decisions, and even the Ribovic fight, the fight that he won in the UFC by decision, very, very sketchy fight. He got dropped in the second round, and I think Loic is kind of past his prime. I mean, he's only 33, but he's been pro for 12 years now, spent a lot of his career, wasted in PFL. And I just don't think this guy's very good. He has been training in Philly a little bit lately, but that's still not enough of a reason for me to endorse him. He also missed weight for his last fight, got absolutely destroyed by Mateusz Rebecki. So I think that I would maybe look to play Al-Selwady round 2-3 decision here, because Loic should have energy to shoot some takedowns, possibly land some takedowns early, but I think when he's not getting those takedowns, he's going to start to slow down. Al-Selwady's going to be able to start stuffing those takedowns, just piecing them up on the feet, and eventually take over and win the fight in either the second or third round by finish or by decision. I would probably honestly go decision for this one here, because Al-Selwady's not a big hitter, so I would just look to fade that round 1, maybe bet Al-Selwady 3 decision and then add in some round 2, because I think that's definitely the most likely outcome here. Also look out for Al-Selwady live bet. If Loic starts well, lands the takedown in round 1, I think that's going to be very short-lived success, and Al-Selwady's going to take over this one late. And that's going to do it, clocking in right around 28 minutes. Not a whole lot of interesting bets on this one for me. Ozzy will be back with us next week. Hopefully, all of my health issues will be cleared up by then. So thank you all for listening. One last apology for, sounding pretty raspy throughout this podcast, but I think I broke down the fights pretty efficiently, and not a whole lot of bets this week either. So, look out for live bets as always. And if you have some bets that you're interested in that you think I missed, hit me up on Twitter, message me, send out a tweet, comment on the YouTube, this and that. So that's going to do it, everyone. Hope you all win some bets. Enjoy the fights. Have a nice weekend, and we'll see you all next week. Peace out, everyone.